Leaked correspondence between government officials in the UK suggests a plot to coerce the public into adhering to COVID mitigation measures through a fear campaign, according to The Guardian. In now public WhatsApp messages back from December of 2020, Britain's ex-health minister, Matt Hancock, expressed concerns that London's mayor would challenge the city's stringent COVID rules and wrote that he wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off everyone with the new strain. To which an advisor replied, yep, that's what will get proper behavior change. Hancock responded, quote, when do we deploy the new variant? Hancock would go on to announce the identification of a new COVID variant in the UK just one day after this conversation took place. So I think the damning thing here is just the way that government public health officials think about the public as sheep to be herded through the proper pastures and through into the stables and wherever else sheep go.
I hear you, Bo Pete. Bring the metaphor home.
I was playing Dungeons and Dragons yesterday, and there was a ranch with some pastures. Anyway, we won't get into all of that. It was a great session. The way that public health officials think that the people just need to be told what to do, and if they're not doing what they're told to do, if they're not following all the rules, then they need to be scared into following the rules. Yeah. That's the kind of authoritarian dystopian thinking that before COVID was backing so much of the national security state, so much of the reaction to 9/11, the knee-jerk fears about terrorism that ended up causing disastrous policies both abroad in the Middle East and at home, because people were scared enough to do whatever government officials told them to do what experts told them to do. Yep. National security experts say overthrowing Saddam Hussein is necessary, say waiting 2 hours in the airport to have hand sanitizer bottles of a greater
waive
size.
Civil liberties and round up Muslims and undermine due process and all of those things. Absolutely. Look, fear is a powerful motivator, and that's what makes it such a dangerous tool. And throughout, even though we've had disagreements about what COVID policies we think are effective and maybe should have been emphasized, my argument has always been that I would prefer that the interventions that I support be incentivized via carrots rather than sticks. Mm-hmm. If the government wants people to mask, they should provide free high-quality masks. If the government wants people to test, they should be providing free testing and not ending the program of sending tests to people's houses. And if they want people to stay home, they should pay them, and they should send food to their houses, and they should make it as convenient as possible. That being said, like the idea that you would exploit people's legitimate fears about a new variant, it seems pretty low, especially when it seems to contradict, it seems to undermine the idea that people felt like the public policy folks believed that there was a sincere threat from the virus. I mean, my argument would be, you don't have to make things up.
Right.
Even people who are against, the more invasive COVID policies acknowledge that getting COVID over and over again is more likely to lead to long COVID and long-term health consequences. You can talk about those kinds of things. You can warn people against the risks and why they should get vaccinated, or et cetera, or why they should take other kinds of precautions. But to feel the need to kind of exaggerate, to embellish the risk posed by a new variant is ultimately only going to lead to diminished public trust. And now that the story is out, that's exactly what's going to happen.
And it shows how they don't understand, what happens when they come up against human nature. It's like they're saying, well, we told everyone they have to stay inside always, and some of them aren't doing that, and that's so frustrating. Why? Well, because it's hard for humans to have confined their social lives, their family lives, the education of their children, their work for a really long time. Yeah, that was difficult for people. We can argue about whether it was necessary or not, but you can't argue about that. It was very difficult for a lot of people, and so many in the epidemiologist community were just in this. Yeah, we got to keep the cases down, so we're going to do this as long as possible, not seeming to factor in how difficult this would be for a lot of people. I remember seeing, surveys of what, like the science expert epidemiologist people were willing to do again. And it was just so much wildly more cautious than what ordinary people think. And then they would say, you have to listen to us because we're the experts. Mm-hmm. But those people didn't have expertise in like messaging or what they're experts in the actual science. They're not expert in, well, if we tell them this, if we tell them X, they'll do Y. And they started to get really, well, we can't, I mean, this was in some of Fauci's thinking, where he's like, well, I can't tell people what I think the herd immunity threshold actually is, because that'll make them too depressed. Or I can't, like, trying to game people. But you're not an expert in that. You're not a political scientist. You're not a public policy surveyor.
Public policy is like a separate discipline that you can get a master's in and like learn things about. And it feels almost like there's just a lot of maybe scientists in public policy positions in a way that it is not useful, because you're supposed to be thinking about social psychology. You're supposed to be looking at historical precedents for how compliance was reached in earlier pandemics, and it maybe that was going on. Maybe there were also some good public policy people in the mix. Maybe those people were in the mix, but they were getting ignored. Like we just watched at a different clip, the former CDC director whose advice was ignored. So clearly people can be sidelined and marginalized even if they are technically in the room. But something obviously went awry, and it will never stop being disturbing to hear how little confidence there was in the public, and to hear how little recognition there was of why the public confidence was so low, and that part of the responsibility lay on so-called public policy experts and politicians.
And then we have to remember all the political figures, not so much the health scientist people, but the political figures enforcing their dictates, who were caught time and time again violating the very rules that for the little people. Gavin Newsom, Ted Cruz, it crosses partisan lines, Nancy Pelosi, and over and over and on and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a world where we didn't have Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah. And when Trump submitted to getting a vaccine and was bragging about his vaccine program coming to fruition and how everyone needed to go get vaccinated, Democrats had stood by him and said, the president is acting very honorably. I'm so supportive of Donald Trump. His vaccine plan is the greatest. Everybody do the Trump vaccine plan. It might have had the added benefit of hurting him electorally in a way that the Democrats would have liked. But instead, what did we see? We saw now Vice President Kamala Harris being asked whether or not she'd take the vaccine, Trump's vaccine, and she said, well, I have questions about it if it's Trump's vaccine.
Do you remember when D.C.'s mask mandate was brought back to coincide with the day after Muriel Bowser's birthday party?
Oh my God, no.
That was a real thing that happened. Yeah, it was like, well, it's scheduled for the day after her birthday party.
Wow. No wonder that public trust is where it is.
Exactly. All right, we will have more Rising right after this. Please stay with us.